Okay,
Recording.
we are recording now, and so
Yeah.
I can edit out this beginning part, but this will be our official start. Okay, I'm going to welcome people joining us here. This is if you're new or somebody passed this on to and shared it with you. Uh, this is Simon and Becca Mwanzia, and Simon is our youth minister at North Point Christian Church. Actually, Becca is too, and I'm not sure who the paycheck is made out to. It's so little, it probably doesn't. But I asked Simon and Becca if they would join me in a conversation, really for the benefit of people at North Point, and if it spills over onto others, then that's fine too. Just to respond to the events of the last week specifically, and then to respond to some questions that are related to race relations in the United States or even in the world, and their unique take on this as being a mixed race couple, and Simon obviously being a Black man. These issues hit home in very real ways right now. So Simon, I'm going to ask you kind of first question to get this started off, and that is when did you first see the video of George Floyd? The first time, where were you and how did that happen?
I think when I first saw it, I was home. Just like everyone else, we're mostly home right now. Quarantine might be lax a little bit, but majority of us are still at home. I'm working from home still. So I was at home. I don't remember what time of day it was exactly. It all kind of blurs together now.
Mm-hmm.
But I was home. I watched it on my phone, like I usually watch every other I think it was on my Instagram page, Imagining. And yeah, so I was there, watched on my phone, and my first thoughts were, it's here we go again. It's more of a numbing feeling nowadays than anything. Okay, here we go again, and this is what, surprised, no, but sad, deeply sad.
And this came, right on the heels of Ahmaud Arbery
Mm-hmm.
and his murder, which came right on the heels of another one, and right on the heels of another one, and another one. So, I think when I watch those things, it has become all too commonplace, and they can be not as shocking. But this one seemed to touch a nerve in a way, obviously, with the protests and the things that have happened, that the other ones didn't. Why do you think that is?
I feel like this time everyone was available to see it. Prior to the pandemic, no one was, everyone's busy with life, right? You don't have time to worry about whatever's happening to other people. You have time to worry about, your job and your kids and your activities and all that kind of stuff. So I think we all have slowed down enough to really see things, instead of just passing through it, scrolling by it, living through another station. We have time to really see things now.
You were numb, but where did anger fit in this one with George Floyd? More, less, or just resignation?
I don't know where my anger goes with this kind of stuff, really. I feel like if I sit with it, I might lash out on my family or withdraw within myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if I really dealt with it yet, kind of thing. So, and even with the other ones, or the countless other ones, and all the ones that you hear about growing up that you don't even internalize because you can't, because there's so many.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Becca, what was your response when you saw this most recent one? I remember you texted me. That
Mhm.
was one of the things that happened. But how did you deal with it?
It's one of the only videos that I have been able to bring myself to watch. Oftentimes, I can't even look at the video footage. I felt it was important to watch this video footage and see, really see it for what it was.
Mm-hmm.
I personally feel a change in my mindset on this topic since this particular death. I don't know exactly why God is working in my heart, specifically this time compared to other times. I think that when you watch the footage and you see bystanders do nothing, that it causes a lot of outrage in me. It causes me to question so much of what I believed growing up and to require something different of myself, because this is my entire family. It hits really close now, more than it used to, sadly to say.
Simon, you grew up in Grapevine, which you're not from Texas. It's just kind of down the road from here. It's really pretty similar to here. Um, let's go to your high school years.
yeah.
Before that, you probably processed racism and race issues differently than when you finally got to high school and got older. And
Mm-hmm.
so forth. But you were you a noticeable minority at Grapevine High School?
Yes. I mean, just like mostly everywhere, right? Growing up, being a minority is just a thing. You're that minority. You just have that knowledge in your head that you're going to be one of the handful of black kids in your school,
Mm-hmm.
maybe the only one in your class. You just that's the way you go.
What was it like for you in high school?
Um,
Did you what was there? Did you sense any kind of noticeable separation between you and the white kids that were in your high school? Did you get?
oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, firstly, financially, like we weren't well off growing up. That's just how parents immigrated here when I was young, um, and they've worked hard their whole lives. Dad had two jobs. Mom had full-time job, and also raised us. So we just did the best we could. Differences in, I don't know, I guess the way people treat each other. Differences in the way um, we looked at each other, behave toward each other, stuff like that.
Mhm. When was the first time you ever heard the words or the concept of white privilege?
Those words have really become more prevalent nowadays. I don't think I've ever heard those words growing up per se. My mom used to always tell me, like when I'd have white friends and they want to do something and they want to stay up late or do something ridiculous. Mom says, you can't do that. You can't go out and do that because you're black. That's not going to have the same outcome because of you for you if you did the same thing. Like, I don't know, staying up late and going to a party for some reason. And she says the consequences for them won't be the same for you. And I never really understood that growing up. Thinking like in my mind, I never realized that until later. But so
Have you personally had an experience with police where you were, um, I don't know the right word, but where you felt like you recognized that you were black and you could be in trouble here if something could go south really easily. Have you ever had that experience?
yeah. Right after high school for like about a 3 month period, um, me and one of my other black friends, we were being basically harassed and tailed by the cops for like a 3 month period. It basically was they the assumption was my friend was dealing drugs, but he wasn't. He was like a little brother to me, straight and narrow kind of kid. And he was always with me in my car, which was a red station wagon Volvo. So
That's kind
carrying
of
drugs. That's what we're moving in. But for like a 3 month period, right after high school, we would be anytime I was ever in the car with him, we'd be stopped for random traffic violations that I've never gotten a ticket for. I don't have a ticket to this day. But and then it culminated at the end where they stopped us one last time coming home, where they said we were speeding. We weren't speeding. Pulled us over, asked if they could search the car. At this point, I was fed up with it, so I said, "Okay, you know what? Fine." There was no probable cause, but I didn't want to do the whole fight for it and then end up something worse. So we got out of the car, sat on the curb. They searched my car, like literally tore it up, took everything out everywhere. Didn't put anything back, and then led us on our way. But never gave us. I never got any reason why. But since but after that, after they searched it, they never bothered me again. But that was a scary time.
I've heard those stories before many times in my life from black friends of mine. Often my white friends would say something like, well, yeah, but they probably did something.
Yeah.
Or that happens to white people the same way.
Yeah.
And when you hear that kind of a response to that, how does that make you feel, or what do you think?
You feel crazy. You feel like, because like when you're followed, you can feel yourself being followed in a store. You can feel yourself being, when a woman does the purse clutch, walk away from you, or move the purse to the other side. You can see that, and then you see like when Becca and I were in Vegas when we lived there for a little bit, we experienced our first interracial like racism, I guess prepared. Yeah, so we were there, and then like we were getting looks for the first time as an interracial couple, and I was like, wow, we weren't getting this in Texas. So now we're getting a different state, and we're like, okay, so you see the things, you start noticing them, you notice them, and then when people tell you they don't exist, it's like, oh no, that happens to everybody. Like, it doesn't actually. Because when I was driving my car with my white friends, I wasn't getting pulled over in that time frame. Nothing was happening, but it was always with the same person, black friend. Every time it was a black friend in the car, I get pulled over.
I think it also silences his voice. Like I think it causes Simon and other people of color to just decide not to share anymore. And, you know, it makes them feel kind of blown off.
Oh, yeah. We've talked, the three of us have talked about this before, but there are some people that don't know this, but because of my family's kind of missionary lifestyle and mindset in our early years, we did some pretty crazy things that our white friends said, why are you doing that? Why are you going to go there? Why are you going to put your family at risk? Or whatever. I mean, I can remember when we took our two little blonde-haired boys and we went to the Philippines for the first time. And I remember getting off the plane and getting picked up by friends who met us there, and realized we were the only white people as far as the eye could see.
How'd that feel?
Well, it was intimidating.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had to keep telling myself, okay, I'm here doing God's work. I'm here, you know, God will protect me. I'm here, you know, those kinds of things. But incredibly self-conscious and noticing that I was different. Now, we were always treated well. I don't remember. Well, in the Philippines, often white people are treated like royalty. And so that probably played into it a little bit, but it was weird to be around everybody that had black hair and my two little white-haired boys on my shoulders sticking out, you know, pretty poorly. Or when we moved down back to San Diego and into a totally integrated low-income part of San Diego, and where my sons in their public school, they were part of the 10% white at a school of about 1,000 or so. Yeah, we noticed, and the kids noticed that the two blonde-haired boys, who generally wore nicer clothes than any of the other kids at the school, yeah, they stuck out. We stuck out, and had, you know, our learning curve was intense for 5 years. It was part of what led me to be where I am and who I am today, was just the amount of listening that I did. Even though I thought I already knew everything, I realized I didn't know anything. And we would go back and try to talk to our white friends about our experience living with people of color. And their only response was, well, nobody made you do that, you know, or why don't you come back home? Why are you doing this? And it was pretty crazy. I mean, it really was. Simon, you're a veteran. What were race issues like for you during your time in the military?
I think for me and most people in the military, race is trained out of you, right? They try to make it seem like you're not black, you're not white, you're not Hispanic, you are the uniform, right? For actually uniform, I've met someone, I was the first black person someone's met or had conversation with in their whole lives. Was one of those interactions I've had. So which was a positive one for me, because I was able to be a good representative, I hope. But in the military, race is, or I would say racism in the military is very subtle. It's in little things like regulations, for instance, like hair rules is like hair regulations, right? And it typically happened that anything that was a traditional African American hairstyle would be faddish for some reason, so you couldn't have it. Or there'd be little things like I get razor bumps when I shave. So there was an instance for me when I first got there in basic training. I told you're supposed to tell your instructor that you have razor bumps and then you need to go to get a waiver. But my instructor instructed me to prove it. So basically, he made me shave my beard. Well, not my beard, just again, yeah, stubble. So made me shave it, and then I get it bad. So if I use a razor, regular razor, so every follicle of my on my face had a bump on it, like I had a bump beard. And so then I was allowed to go to the medical facility to get the waiver and the medicine that I needed, the steroid to help heal my face. And then luckily for me, I had a doctor who was outraged by what happened and informed my instructor's supervision, and he was reprimanded. But stuff like that, there's always little stuff like that. We had an incident where one of my master sergeants referred to me as his little African for a while. And at that point, I was a staff sergeant, so I had rank and people under me. So that was embarrassing, degrading, and like in front of everybody, like I was like, okay, I don't. So stuff like that. But it's one of those things where you expect it. No, you don't expect it. You are accustomed to it, so you kind of okay. I thought this would be different, but it's not. A little bit more of the same kind of thing.
And in the military, there was nothing really that he could have done about it.
You tell your boss's boss, and he deals with it, and then it's swept under the rug. I don't know. There's still a little bit of a good old boys club in the military, and they're still working to get rid of it.
But honestly, I mean, that isn't much different than just general society.
Yeah.
Because you have adopted sort of this attitude of resignation in many ways, that this is just the way that it is, and you want to try to get through it, as best you can.
Yeah.
So with the military kind of backdrop on this, I was reading this week, I don't know if it was a real conversation or if it was just a hypothetical. Either way, it doesn't really matter. But the conversation went like this. It was between a white guy and a black guy.
Mm-hmm.
And the white guy looks at the black guy and goes, why are you guys so pissed off all the time? You guys are just all pissed off all the time. And he responds back, well, we're dealing with kind of a really centuries of various forms of oppression and devaluing and, going back to slavery and all the way through. He just sort of explains it a little. And the guy says, well, but why do you have to protest? Why do you have to, loot and tear up buildings and block traffic and throw stuff at, police officers? Why do you have to do that? And the black guy goes, well, what would you rather we do? Mm-hmm. Because we're pretty powerless to affect any change. And he goes, well, why don't you, can't you just protest peacefully and quietly? And the black guy's response was, well, we actually tried kneeling, and you see where that got us.
Yeah.
I thought, oh my goodness, I had not even gone to Colin Kaepernick. in this whole process,
Mhm.
but looking back on him as a silent, peaceful protester,
Mhm.
the thing that we just saw happen. So I want to ask you, as somebody uh, out of the military, somebody who is obviously a patriot in terms of serving our country,
Mhm.
representing our country, how, how did you feel about Colin Kaepernick? And that it's been 3 or 4 years now, but
Yeah.
uh, how did you process that? Was he evil? Did you see him as somebody anti-American, or what? How did you personally deal with it?
I would say in Kaepernick's case, he took a knee. You take a knee at a football game when someone gets hurt. You take a knee out of respect. A knee is not offensive. If Kaepernick stood up there and burned a flag, that's offensive. He took a knee because he was fed up. He asked the story that I'm hearing is that he asked one of his buddies who was I think a Navy SEAL, what's the most respectful way I can do this? And the Navy SEALs are the top of. It's the hardest thing to get into. That's military. And he told him to take a knee. So I don't see a problem with him taking a knee. I mean, what hurts me the most about the whole Kaepernick thing is there's always some sort of distraction. No one ever wants to deal with the actual issue. They want to deal with the perceived offense. It's always turned to somehow, I don't know how, it's always us versus them for some reason. Instead of us all together appalled by the injustice, no, it's flipped to if you're with Kaepernick, you're anti-American. Instead of saying, wow, why was that guy killed? Why did it happen like that? Why, like I don't have a problem with it. Like, but everyone else seems to have a problem with it. You wear I can't breathe shirt. The NBA wore I can't breathe shirts. That was what are they doing? Stick to basketball. Like you can't do anything. You can't there's nothing. Protests aren't supposed to be agreeable. That's the point, right? Martin Luther King was the most peaceful protester there was, and he was shot. Everyone loves to quote him in times like this. Martin Luther King said this and that. Why can't you like Martin Luther King? He was shot. So
We were having a discussion around our dinner table tonight, and there's a lot of young people, like the kids in our youth group,
mm-hmm.
don't yet have perspective yet. They don't understand history as well as hopefully they will down the line. But I've heard many of my white friends, and I'm not. These are not bad people by any means. Their perspective would be, but things are so much better for African Americans now. It's so much better. Now, it's not perfect, but it's so much better. And I think if you just had a little bit of historical perspective,
mm-hmm.
the only reason that some things are actually better is because of protest.
Yeah.
If protests would not have happened, you still wouldn't be able to vote.
Yeah.
Voting happened because people rose up and protested the injustice in our system.
Yeah.
And those in power reluctantly let you in to vote. Although your vote wasn't a full vote initially.
Yeah.
It was a partial vote.
Yeah.
But we would say, but see how much better things are now. That's a relative term, but better happens sometimes only because people rise up and make life extremely uncomfortable for those that are in control or in power. So how do you feel about the last 7 days or so of protests going on in our country? What are your emotions or feelings about that?
I feel a bit encouraged. I feel like this is one of the first times where this is actually a multiracial protest, where it's not just people who look like me in that protest. It's white people, it's Hispanic people, there's, you know, everybody in the protest, that everyone is now, you know, coming together and actually seeing what's happening and doing something about it. Because in the end of the day, this isn't a Black problem to fix.
No.
We can protest all we want, but until people with power could change it, we can vote all we want, but we're the minority still. Even if we all vote the same exact way, we still can lose.
How will you guys define racism to your daughters when they get old enough to understand?
Hit us with the hard ones.
Yeah, I don't know.
I didn't give you
well, if I would. Our daughters, Eloise already knows about race in her own kind of way. I think she's what's it called? She talks about how I'm Black, brown, and mommy is she call you white? What she call
I
you?
think she calls me white.
She calls mom white, and then she says she's just regular brown, and Livy's regular brown, and Francis is regular brown. And then she talks about how my parents are like me, her parents are like her, kind of thing. And she's asked the question, why doesn't mom and dad look the same? Stuff like that. So if tomorrow, which might happen, she asks crazy questions sometimes. So if tomorrow she asked me what's racism, I would say racism is when you don't look like somebody for the way they look, and you treat them differently. You treat them badly because of it.
You make assumptions based on how somebody looks.
Yeah.
Instead of getting to know them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's pretty similar to how we tried to teach our boys when they were young, what that meant. But to be honest, they heard it through the lens or the filter of being a white person.
Yeah.
And your daughters will hear it through a different filter as they
go.
And their processing will be different, along the way. What, one of the biggest points of contention in our culture, really, I mean, it's gone on for quite a while, but it seems to have really come to a head, with the protests and everything going on here recently. A point of contention is the issue of whether or not white privilege exists. And there are many white people that are stepping up and definitely saying what happened to George Floyd was wrong on every level.
Mm-hmm.
And that the police officer should be dealt with harshly, and all of that kind of stuff. But when the conversation turns a little deeper and it gets a little personal and it turns to white privilege, there are many, especially many of the in the media or in politics or whoever, just kind of across the board, there are many that are saying that that is a culturally contrived idea that is simply not true.
Mm-hmm.
How would you answer somebody who says white privilege is an idea that people of color have made up that does not exist, not anymore anyway?
I would say it's a hard thing to explain, well, or to even understand, but I'll give it a try now. You got to break it down to, I can understand the hesitation and the denial of that word, because first part's white, right? So that's saying every white person has it. You imagine so. And the next part's privilege. And then if you are a white person who's living in a poor neighborhood and downtrodden, and you would say you have no privilege, right? You would say there's nothing, that's not possible for me. But then you have to think about, like, there's so many levels to it, right? I mean, you start off with slavery. Even if you weren't a slave owner, your family wasn't slave owners, you still, you might even lost your job because of slaves, right? Because maybe you've lost your piece of that farm that you were sharecropping with that, landowner. Now it's slaves doing it. You're mad at them. You're not privileged then, right? But eventually you are, because now the economy's booming right there because slavery. Everyone's getting the cotton money, and then eventually you're a landowner now, and still slaves, still slaves, still slaves. Eventually slaves are free. Then slaves are free, great. But what did they get? Nothing. They got to start over in a country where they were, they don't have any education, any safety net, any money, anywhere to go. And most of them go back to working for the same masters that they left, because now they're paying them, but little or nothing. And then on top of that, they can't vote. So that means they can't change their perspective on the country. They can't change anything for themselves. Then they can't, they don't have any rights whatsoever. They have to live in the worst parts of the neighborhood. They have to eat the worst kind of food. Then what? Finally get to vote. Great. Segregation is occurring. Jim Crow laws are occurring. Schools are terrible. You can't build yourself up. There's no one's passing you down anything because no one has anything. So there's no loan from your parents to help you get into school. There's no loan from your parents to help you get a house. There's nothing because no one has anything. And then you move on to redlining. You can't live in this neighborhood. You can't even get a loan because you live in that neighborhood. You can't, trying to suppress the vote, making polling stations far away from where you live. You can't even vote. Can't make it in time. Right? It just compounds on itself. And then only way to really build wealth in America is home ownership or a college degree. Can't get in college. You don't have any, well, who's your reference? Oh, your dad wasn't part of the fraternity? Yeah, of course he wasn't. He wasn't allowed in. Can't get in this college because you weren't in that school, because you didn't make SAT score. It builds on itself. And then eventually, before you know it, you're looking around and the rules are against you. I was researching this, looking it up, trying to understand it really for myself. And I came across a few things, like it's this 3-part thing. The first part's the power of normal. So everything in America is white-centric, really, if you look at it. We have to go to different stores to find products for our girls' hair. We have to, all Band-Aids, for instance, small little thing. Band-Aids are a nude color, but what's that color?
What?
Ballet leotards, nude color. What's that color? It's all that kind of stuff. And I mean, you think, oh, wait, no, that's normal, but America's built normally for white people, and that's part of it. And then there's the power of the benefit of the doubt. Black people don't get the benefit of the doubt when it comes to crime, when it comes to, you know, anything. What's the first thing anyone says when someone gets killed by a cop? What did he do? What was he doing? Oh, he shouldn't have been breaking the law. But breaking the law doesn't mean you die. Breaking the law means you get a trial. You're innocent to proven guilty, not dead before even your Miranda rights are read to you. And then the last thing was the power of accumulated power. So, like I said before, I mean, the wealth gap is huge. Even if you have a college degree and you're Black, most of the time you're not getting hired anywhere because they see your last name and they say, "Oh, it's a Black person. Let's look at this other guy's resume." John Smith, same, you can have the same kind of qualification, same GPA, but you can look up the numbers. The studies tell the tale. So I say that's like white privilege in a nutshell. I say it's no one. I mean, I would say growing up today, you were born white. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything to get it. No one's blaming you for having it. I'm sure in other countries there's the same thing going on, just in different directions, right? It's not white privilege, it's African privilege, it's Asian privilege, it's Indian privilege, it's whatever religious sect you're in, Muslim privilege probably, it's probably all that kind of stuff. But to deny it's happening, I would say, is kind of dangerous.
I think that before Simon and I got married, I had a very different perspective on these matters. First, they didn't touch me personally, so embarrassingly enough, I kind of turned a blind eye to it. As Simon and I got to talk more about it, I think it was like our first year of marriage that we started facing some of these things together. And I started to realize how my white privilege was tinting my view of these situations, and how I had a bias to assume the best of the cop in these situations because I had never been told otherwise. I grew up thinking and being told that the police are good, and I do believe that. I believe that law enforcement is important. But I had never questioned the actions of a police officer in this way, or been exposed to the truth of the matter, which is that based on the color of Simon's skin, people are going to make assumptions about his actions, depending on where he is, whom he is with, and what he is doing. And it was really a hard thing for me to break my habit of asking, well, what was the person doing when they got arrested? Mm-hmm. Or, we don't know the whole story. I think, gosh, I have said that so many times in our conversations. And that's true. We don't know the entire story. But these are not lives. These are not offenses that would take someone's life. These are not crimes that require a life penalty. They're misdemeanors. They're things that white people get away with all the time. And once I was able to face my own privilege and look that in the eye and admit that it was there, that I think is when I started listening better, because it wasn't my voice to be heard.
I think another thing, you know, when often white people hear the word white privilege, or it's assigned to us, the defense goes up because it sounds so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I've realized just throughout the course of my life is that privilege is actually a really good thing if you use it to make life better. There are things that I have been able to do in my life. I never really associated it with, oh, gee, I get to do this because I'm white. I just know I got to do anything I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
There were absolutely no limitations in any way at all. And that would be my life growing up. It's been my life as a pastor. Just none at all limitations. And so trying to get people of privilege to use their privilege for good is pretty hard business, because anytime you use privilege to benefit somebody else, you end up losing something that you have. Mm-hmm. Money, status. You know, when we made our decision to move from suburban Orange County in Southern California to, you know, the more urban area of East San Diego, our friends in suburban Orange County said, why would you ever leave this? Why would you ever give this up? Well, you have to give up something sometimes to be of benefit to somebody else. And what people who are privileged fail to understand so often is, in the act of giving up something like privilege, you end up gaining something that your money can't ever buy you. Yeah. Is that you end up with purpose. You end up affecting life and affecting change in ways that you could never do if you just spent your life protecting what you have. And that's this dialogue that I have had my whole life as a white guy, talking to my white friends, going, don't get all bent out of shape if somebody says you have privilege. You do. Use it. Mm-hmm. Use it to make a difference. Use it to change somebody's life. You know, the Bible says that we have the wealth that we have as a gift from God, and one of the reasons that we have the money we have is to be of benefit to other people with our money. Mm-hmm. That's what privilege can do. So,
and I'm in no way saying that people haven't worked for what they've had and haven't given everything to achieve what they've achieved. I'm just saying that, you know, the cards aren't stacked fairly. And that's no one's fault except the people that originated the stacking.
I've always said it to myself that my path has been easier than my friends of color. It's just been easier. And that doesn't make me better, and it doesn't mean that they haven't worked as hard, and it doesn't mean that they haven't had some really good breaks along the way.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean a lot of things, but it does mean something significant. So here's a couple more questions and we'll be done.
Yeah.
Your daughters are doing really well. I mean, did you?
Oh, they're asleep.
Or something. This is a hot button, so I thought I might as well say it. What is what do you think of the Black Lives Matter movement?
I would say in general, I think it's a positive movement. I think it's I think when you say Black Lives Matter, when you say that, you're saying my brother's life matters, my sister's lives matters, my mom, my dad, my 3 kids matter. And we're saying that because it doesn't seem like the world is showing that to us back.
Mm-hmm.
So Black Lives Matter doesn't mean white lives don't matter, or Hispanic lives don't matter, or Asian lives don't matter. Black Lives matters means that, look, see me as you see yourself. You know, like, I matter too.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just sweep me on the rug. Don't say just another one. You know, don't push it. Don't push it down and just ignore it. Black Lives Matter means, name. I always find it easier to think of it as, find the person in your life that's that Black life, and say their name instead of saying Black Lives Matter. Say their name, whoever that is. If it's me, say my name.
I think that the tendency for people who disagree with that phrase, Black Lives Matter, is the response is, well, all lives matter. And my response back to them would be like, yeah, that's the point. They do, including Black lives.
Mm-hmm. It's a good response, Becca.
And it's just one of those things where I think we're doing too much defense for some reason. We hear Black Lives Matter, like, oh, and we're getting defensive for no reason. That's not attacking anybody. That's not a threat. It feels like when someone says that, they're threatening somebody else. Because I see it, like, especially recently with this, I see, someone writes Black Lives Matter on the Facebook post, and then the first comment I always see is all lives matter. And I'm like, yeah, that's what we're trying to say. We're trying to say Black Lives Matter as well.
Yeah.
But it's being missed. I never understood why that was missed. I don't get it to this day, why that doesn't make sense to people. No one is attacking you with Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, I probably have had more people, more of my white friends, be uncomfortable with the statement Black Lives Matter. I've had more people be uncomfortable with that than just about anything.
Yeah.
And then it's usually followed with, why can't we just say all lives matter? And my response inside, I generally don't say it out loud, is, you really don't get it. I mean, you said it both of you said it so well, and yet it seems to pass by so many people. That Black Lives Matter is such a positive, affirming statement.
Mm-hmm.
And especially for a white person to say that, given the white privilege and given history and given the positions of power that we tend to hold, and all of the benefits that, at least the pathway to benefits seems to favor us, mine. What a simple thing it would be to say to a Black person, your life matters.
Yeah.
Yes.
And yet it's turned into this offensive statement.
Yes.
And
I would like to say that I think one of the roadblocks is, if you don't A lot like that friend I met in the military who never had a conversation with a black person before in his life. All lives matter makes sense because all your lives look like you, right? There's no differential between black, white, or the other because there's not many. Some people, me and them being in the military, you learn some people grew up their whole lives without meeting minorities, right? They don't even, that's not even part of their lives. So all lives matter would make sense in that sense because everyone's being treated the same, right? There's no differential for you. Like it's all the same. But then once you have someone in your life who's, a minority, and they, and being a minority, what you get used to is you understand. Like I understand what it is to live in white culture, right? That's because I have to. But I also understand how to live in black culture, and I also understand how to live in African culture because I'm African as well. And those cultures, there's differences. But you have to do it, right? But being white, you don't have to. You could go your whole life and not have to do that. And that there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing even, I'm not even faulting you for that because where you grew up, it's not your fault. And I think until you step out of your own lane and, merge over to someone else's lane and, have somebody who would impact you that way where you think, wait, do all lives matter, really? Maybe. It's me thinking out loud, though.
Sometimes that's what we have to do. Last question, unless you have one, you don't have to ask me questions. I'm perfectly okay. My last one for you is, how does being a follower of Jesus help you deal with racism?
I would say it puts a perspective on it that helps me deal with it. Because if you are Christian and a Christ follower, you are in this world, but not of it. So this is not really my final destination. This is not really my, life-ending struggle. So I feel like even if I meet the most, vicious racist in the world, I can still find a place to love them, and I can still find a place to forgive them because I know that I've been forgiven, and I know I'm not perfect, and I know there's things in my life that, I've been forgiven. And so being able to say, Christ died for me and for you, no matter if you hate me or not, that's the best way I do it. I think sometimes I think the church isn't, sometimes I think the church uses its platform poorly, though, and that hurts me. I feel like church as a whole has done a poor job in this department, in the race conversation. Just because we're supposed to be the voice of the lowest man. We're supposed to be the voice of the downtrodden and the beaten and the abused, and supposed to be people fighting for that. And I don't think we are.
You may need to ask you more questions.
Okay.
And that is, and you may not have an answer for this, and you can just say I can't answer that. That's for the next the next
Next episode.
What would you say specifically to North Point about some things that we could maybe consider doing to becoming better agents of reconciliation or agents of justice in the world, especially in the realm of racial reconciliation? What do you think we could do?
I would say the first thing you could do would just be to look it up.
Mm-hmm.
Just see it. Just see it. Just look. Just Google whatever you gotta Google. Find a book.
Expose yourself to it.
Yeah. Because once you open that door, there's not really anything else you don't stop.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you just start seeing little things. I mean, I saw it with Becca. She opened that door and she just started seeing things and just wait, that was that. Oh my goodness, I can't believe that was happening. And comes to the point where she's now noticing things that I'm missing. Like, all right, that was weird, But I would say the first thing, if you don't know anything about any of this, I would say the majority of things that are assumed, me talking to people, things that are assumed to be racist or come from racist point of view are just ignorance. Most of us don't know that, something's offensive or we're coming across as racist when we're doing things sometimes. And I think if we just take the time to learn about, white privilege and all the things that lead up to it and, racism and systematic racism and all that kind of stuff, I think if we really look at it, we can, at the very least, form an opinion for ourselves with knowledge, with actual knowledge on it, instead of just, spitting whatever you see on Facebook or, talking about whatever you see on the news. But that's a start.
Go ahead, Becca.
I would encourage people to get uncomfortable. It's worth being uncomfortable for a little while to really see what's going on. It's not easy. It's not always going to be fun. It's may feel really hard, but it's worth it to be a follower of Christ and to be a voice for those who aren't heard. Mm-hmm. It's our job as Christians.
I'll add one thing to that part of this discussion, and that's that one of the favorite lines of white people is to say, well, I've got a black friend. I've got a black friend. And
it's the worst.
It's so embarrassing for me to hear that when somebody says it. Why don't you just say you got a friend, number one? But we have to declare that we are, openly combating racism because we've got a black friend. But what I tend to do with my friends who say that is, well, you may have a black friend and you may be able to cheer the Dallas Cowboys on together, or you may have a common love of, barbecue, or you may, you may both love rap music, or, I don't know. That all of those things are so stereotypic, but that's
yes.
That's what tends to draw people of different cultures together, are these lighter weight interests that we share together, which is where we begin any friendship. But I would say to my white friends is, if you have a black friend, or if you have a Hispanic friend, or some Asian friend, then make time to sit down with them and cut the lightweight conversation.
Yeah.
Ask them what it's like to live in their skin. Ask them to tell you what it's like to be a Black person in America, and really listen. Um, that is something that has changed me over my lifetime, is being able to have those conversations with my friends of color and going, you know, what is this like for you, or what is that like for you? And then taking that in and developing a much deeper appreciation for the cultural differences we have. And then maybe we can get on the same page for some greater things, you know, and we can all do that. But that speaks to the get uncomfortable part.
Yeah.
That's not a comfortable thing to do. It is much easier to get together with a group of guys and gripe about Jerry Jones. You know,
He's the worst.
You know, just this common awareness, you know. But the conversations sometimes never get any deeper than that. But they can, because I think people want to go deeper. And so maybe we can work together to challenge our friends to do that, and both in our church and beyond. So anyway, I want to thank you guys for doing this. I don't know if it was uncomfortable or comfortable or whatever, but it was. And to the end that maybe we have collaborated to help our church family take a step farther down the road, then it's been worth our while to do it. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Your evening, and we'll do part 2 on one of these days down the road.
All right.
Ooh, can't wait.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
End.
Hey, I have a question.
Still recording.
Oh no, it's still recording. But I didn't want this recorded.
Wait a second, let me, oh gosh, oh here, yeah, stop recording.